All right. Shall we say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are there any changes to the agenda that anybody needs to make? Hearing none. We'll move on to the live district calendar.
All right. Once again, we have our live district calendar up. I'm already reminded myself, because it's up, that I have to update the voting day. Because obviously that was a change that happened. We have a fundraiser currently going on. That's that big chunk of orange right there. We have an HDI residency going on right now. That should culminate in a performance, I believe, on the 31st. We have a paying for college one-on-one event coming up for the middle high school on Wednesday. We have a spring athletics meeting on Thursday. Let's see what else we got. We'll move into the next month. You know, I think that's pretty much the major stuff in between now and our next school board meeting. Obviously, if anybody wants to go further down the pipeline into April, we certainly can, but the big chunk is kind of in that week, and the things that I said.
Okay, good. Thank you, Nick. And next on our agenda is our public comments. First opportunity.
All right, and currently the policy is loading. While that comes up, I'll just explain the rules. If you are in person, you can raise your hand. I can give you a microphone. If you are remote, I can have you raise your hand via the hand raise feature at the bottom of the screen. I can address you that way. In either case, just first name, last name, and town of residence. And it does not appear that our policy wants to pull up right now for us. I'll give it one more try. But it's the same policy that we normally put up on the screen.
Sure.
Essentially be kind. Keep things to, mostly agenda items. Again, the first name, last name, town of residence. I think those are kind of the major items. No personal attacks. Make sure that you're keeping it to content, not people.
Good. Thank you, Nick.
I don't see anything online at this time. Anything for our in-person audience? Okay.
So nobody's raised their procedure is they just hit the button to raise their hand, right?
Yeah, there's a button on the screen that regardless of what screen type you're on, it's something on the bottom. You press it, I get a little hand, and then I can give somebody permission to speak. Just a little different with the webinar format because it allows people to not interrupt us, pop up. It gives us the control over who's able to speak or not speak.
Okay, well, great. And now we have the pleasure of having our student of the month back. Welcome. Yeah, we've missed you and understand that you've been very busy.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Basketball is keeping me busy for a while. So today we had a representative from the Save Life Tour come in, and basically they talk about the importance of not being distracted and impaired while driving, and how much alcohol and texting and all that can affect your driving and your judgment abilities. And I thought it was really informational and just overall a really good event. On Wednesdays, SATs and PSATs are happening for, I believe it's 8th through 11th. spring sports started today with baseball and softball and I believe it was track or cross country, one of the two, having tryouts and stuff today. The boys basketball had a pretty good season. They ended up 12-6 and they lost in the quarterfinals. Indoor track had a good season. Cheerleading finished 6th, which was right out of the running to go to state. So for the cheerleading competition, and girls basketball was 17-1 and we lost in the championship, but still was a pretty good season.
Great. Yeah, we all watched the progress of the teams and we're very, I guess you'd have to say proud of you for,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for including the other sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Anybody have any other questions for our student? Now I'm gonna sound like I don't pay attention, which sometimes I don't, but this is what you. Which year is, what year are you in?
I'm a junior.
You're a junior, so you've got one more year. Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to with approaching your senior year?
Graduating.
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. Very good.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
How would you describe? Sorry to ask you this question. How would you describe the identity of the school?
I think a lot of our students have a really good understanding of how we want school to look, spirit, just overall in the classrooms, in the hallways and everything. And I think overall it's just a pretty good community.
Nice. Yep. Good. Good. And okay, well, thank you very much for coming and for giving us the update, and it's nice to have you back. And Ruben, I think that brings us to your superintendent's report.
Great, well, there's some things written there, and I'll go and highlight some of those items also just to kind of add a little bit more about the school community. I think here in the identity, I really, it's fun to see what the high school learners did over the break to the bathrooms. So if you haven't had an opportunity to go see a lot of the painting that went on, Pac-Man and Space Invaders is in the boys' bathroom over that way now. They like to paint the walls, different themes. SpongeBob's over in the middle school. Very exciting.
Wow.
So no, and some of them it's just really neat to see the effort. I'm sure the hours put in to creating murals basically, but the bathroom is the mural. So just making it a little more student friendly, I guess you could say.
Nice. Now, did they do that on their own or with the art teacher, or how does that work?
There were some times that there were teachers with them, and the art teachers, I think the girls' bathroom over here in particular had some support from the art teachers. But I think perhaps there were some design, I wasn't there for,
Yeah.
a lot of it, but I did see adults there with them in different areas, and sometimes they were on their own. So.
Great.
Congratulations to some other people as well. Certainly our athletic teams, but we also have Ann Marr, who is recognized as the New Hampshire School Library Media Association's Library Media Associate of the Year. And she is over at Ridge Memorial School. Ella Weinman, student here, winner of the New Hampshire Poetry Out Loud contest this past weekend. She's going to be representing the state at the national event in Washington, D.C. I believe early April is what I have. I don't have a date, but I believe that's what I've been told. And also, I think this past week was named Youth Volunteer of the Year here in Jaffrey. So, and then former board member, former board chair, Laurel McKenzie, also a volunteer, coach really, for us here at the robotics coach here at the school is recognized as the volunteer of the year in Jaffrey. And then we had a couple of Destination Imagination teams, actually 3 Destination Imagine teams that are going on to the state competition this coming Saturday. Couple of them came in first, the Monstrous Markers over at RMS and the Improvables, I believe it is, from CHS. We also have a JGS team that was third as well. I don't have their name, but I do know that it might be the JGS DI team.
No, they are Team Waffle.
Team Waffle is good.
That's what happens when you put the naming into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
All right, no, Waffle's exciting. So Team
There's-
Waffle,
And there's no S on it, it's just.
just waffle. All
I
right,
called it waffles, and my daughter was quick to tell me that was not correct.
so that should be exciting. The JGS principal interview search update, just we're rolling along the committee. We have quite a large committee, but it's split into 2 sections, a section of parents and section of what we would typically see the interview committee being some teachers, some people from the support staff, some individuals from the SAU and school board and so forth. So the structure of the interviews is going to be that 2 people will come at a time. They won't be with each other. One will be interviewing with one group, one with the other, and then, there may be some in between time of just kind of relaxing and then switching locations. And we have a couple rounds like that this Tuesday and then also this coming Thursday. So we're looking forward to moving forward from there, and hopefully we'll be being able to name a finalist so that we can bring those individuals back next week for a longer visit, more communication, more conversation with groups such as the board, and then keep on moving from there. It would be nice to have that situated by end of March, early April. It will help us with some transition. Facilities director interview search update that we have people who have applied. And we have a team that's going to be meeting for the first time this coming Wednesday afternoon. And we will again hope to have a candidate within April to go to the board. We were notified by a group from the Monadnock United Way this a couple weeks ago, just after the board meeting, I believe it was, that there was a grant opportunity in the region, and that grant opportunity was for up to $250,000 for the purpose of planning for a grant. So it's a planning grant to help the state develop a grant, I guess you could say, or application for the following year to apply for more federal funds. So this is, we are a school district, maybe a school district, we don't know who applied, but we're a school district in the region who has applied for this. It was a very quick turnaround. We needed to put it together very quickly and get it in, and a couple of us really worked at it. Fortunately, we have been doing some nice work, and we have a lot of people who are doing research right now in different areas, and so we were able to utilize a lot of what we had. We put the 7 pages single space together in a day and a half, and put the budget together, and we'll see how it rolls. It was accepted. Got it just in time, and so this week we will find out if we get that or not. We may not. That's okay. It still was a good process, and we still actually it was a nice exercise to kind of practice for grant writing, and also to see kind of what we have been accomplishing. It was really neat to read it. And I do have a copy of that if anyone wants to read that. Be more fun to read it if we actually get the money. But it is an idea. The idea here is not just about our school, but it's about our communities. It's not just about the kids that are in our school system. It is that. but it is also about those who are not in our school system. It is about those who are, before the school, even school system age. And so how do we help the community really support the health, well-being, and learning of all of our children? An example, one of the pieces of data that we were able to uncover is that in 2017, we had 125 births in Ringe and Jaffrey. 5 years later, we had 84 kids in kindergarten. Now, there may be some who move away, but even when some move away, we find out, just like anything else, people move in. And so you have about 20, we figure we on average, just taking 2 to 3 years worth of data, from 20 to 30% of the children in our communities, we're not servicing directly. And so this plan, part of this plan will be, how do we help service them, even if they're not coming to our school for whatever reason? How are we helping parents? How are we helping organizations? How are we partnering with, we've listed 24 community partners potentially, to really accomplish something very neat. Robust would be a word, I guess you could say. Community schools, the definition is really being a hub for wellness and growth. So if you were to go and research community schools and say Chicago, maybe, I'm just pulling that up because I read an article one time. You might have doctors and dentists and therapists like on site at the school so that kids could make appointments and so forth. I'm not sure we're going to have physicians on site at our schools or have office areas and things like that, but the same idea would be to have people who are partners be able to come to the school, come to the area, support people in a stronger way. That's the concept behind that. Voting day.
Right.
Voting day got switched. So it's next week, next Tuesday. We have a policy that states that we don't have in-person learning during voting days. So I have asked for a waiver from the Department of Education to allow us to do some remote learning. There are some other schools that are in a similar boat, so it wasn't. We're not the only ones. So we do have approval to move forward to have remote learning for Orange Memorial School that day. And for the middle school, high school that day. Jaffrey Grade School will be in person, which is good for Jaffrey Grade School because they are still trying to get their NHDI residency in as well. That has been postponed and missing that again due to weather. So we're trying to get that in. And it also might be a day, it's possible that it is a day that we might consider bringing a finalist to the district during that time frame. We have that as a potential day. I got to talk to some people prior to making that happen. And then we are in the process of recruiting for the Teacher Leadership Academy 3.0. So right now we definitely have a cohort of individuals, but those signups are still occurring, and hopefully by early April we'll know who those are. But we have our first course, technology course in the summertime. Then it will be followed by a fall leadership course, a spring leadership and supervision course, and then a couple of curriculum and instruction courses late spring into summer that will dovetail into one another so that they build upon each other for the betterment of our professionals who are working in those areas.
How many applicants do you have?
Right now we have 12, I would say 10 for the entire academy, 2 who want to finish coursework that they were in the academy members before, but say COVID took place and they may not have finished a course or 2. And then there's a lot of good things happening. Again, April 11th, I'll be able to share some of that information at a state innovation conference. So I'm presenting there in Concord, and then April 18th, I'm also presenting on a narrower focus with Dr. Joan Swanson of Franklin Pierce University. I'm going to Franklin Pierce University to present at maybe it's an annual kind of professional development day where people present their work that they're doing. So at 10 or 10:30 in the morning on the 18th, I get to go and take part in that. So that's exciting.
Wow. Quite a lineup of things. Thank you, Rube. Does anybody have any questions? About any of the things that Ruben's shared. Well, great, and congratulations on that community schools planning grant. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it was good to put together, a little nerve wracking because of the tight time frame, but I think what helped us be able to do it, like more than just what I said, we had some information, we had already been moving in certain areas already doing preschool and so forth. We had good community partners already, and that was a big piece of the grant, was show that you have had a pattern of being able to work with people in your community and bring them and collaborate and build on a collaborative leadership type of mentality. So it was kind of up our alley. We decided to go for it.
Makes sense.
Now we may have completely missed the mark, and that's possible too. We weren't in the system to be able to ask questions, like there were, we had missed that. It was a month prior to us finding out about it. So we couldn't ask questions.
Well, you can't count on getting every grant you apply for, but I'm sure you learned a lot and moved your thinking forward in the
Yeah.
process.
It's fun. Yep.
All right, excellent. So if there are no other questions for Ruben, then let's move on to the consent agenda.
I have a quick question. So let's just say we don't get this grant. Is this an annual thing? Do we have to be invited to apply for the planning grant money?
I wish I could give you a straight answer on that one. Because I just wasn't part of I am on a state committee right now that is looking at preschool. What they would call a mixed delivery model. This coming at the same time as that makes me believe that there was some money that the state had for the purpose of early childhood. And so this, as far as I know, is a this year thing.
Okay.
Because the planning is to put together a plan and a process and information to strengthen a grant that I'm guessing there are 2 to 3 other districts, maybe in other parts of the state, maybe doing the same thing. And maybe what we're doing is we're putting them together, and UNH is overseeing this. So in Durham. So I'm figuring that they're the ones who are going to help apply from the state of New Hampshire for a much larger sum of money. So I am part of it. We're trying to position ourselves into being able to get more support in future years.
Yep.
For this district and this community in this region. I don't know if it's annual or not.
Yeah, good question.
Before we do the consent agenda, I have 2 questions on it.
Yes,
That's okay. One is the donation of the camera anonymous, or can that be known?
It's from our
Donation.
yearbook company.
I'd like to pull donation and have a discussion.
okay. So we'll pull the donation and vote on that separately after the consent agenda. Okay,
Need a motion?
Well, I have a question too, though, or should I say that? Oh, I'll just say that's my question. When I look at the spring coaches, if there isn't a coach listed, does that mean we don't have one hired? Like, for instance, there's no middle school baseball coach.
Mhm.
And there's a girls tennis coach, but there's no boys tennis coach. So I'm just wondering if we don't have those, if we don't have interest in those sports.
Yeah, I can answer the tennis one,
Mhm.
in that there isn't enough interest for the boys tennis team right at this point in time.
Okay.
The as for the middle school baseball, I believe it is possible they're still looking for a coach.
Interesting.
Yeah, good point. And so, yes, we do need a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda, minus the, donation for the camera.
Okay, thank you, Forrest.
I'll second the motion.
Daisy, thank you. Okay. If there are no questions, then all those in favor,
I have
please.
discussion.
Yeah.
If that's okay. So, the second thing I wanted to talk about was, since it's listed, that means it's public. Please tell us about Ken Baker getting a stipend for acting principal.
So for about a month, 2 months, there will be an individual who is not going to be here as the principal. And so we need to have an individual who is going to serve in that individual's place and out of the administration, we had a couple choices. You can go out and get someone to help support that. This was a less expensive route to take and also gives us the opportunity to build more capacity within.
All right, thank you for the question, Lisa. Thank you, Ruben. Okay. So, all those in favor of the consent agenda as modified, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay. Thank you. And now we have a presentation on the master library. Oh, sorry, that's right. No, the donation. Thank you, folks. Keeping an eye on me. Appreciate it.
Nick, tell us about the camera.
Yeah, just give me a moment.
It's okay if it's anonymous or just that.
No, it's not anonymous at all.
It's a generous thing.
I just want to make sure I have the information pulled up, so I'm not speaking correctly. It's from the yearbook company. It's just for us renewing with them as a yearbook company for the people that produce our yearbook, Jostens. It's just an agreement where they give a camera to help aid in the usage of creating the yearbook. So it just gives the club a dedicated camera to use.
I read the documentation that came with it. And none of the documentation says anything about donation. It allows us to purchase it. The purchase agreement, so. If there's a donation, I'd like to see some documentation, otherwise.
There was the second, when you had asked the questions.
I read the second one too, Nick. If you read the second one, it says nothing about donation.
Conditional guaranteed budget if CHS hits deadlines agreed upon within Jostens rep. And all runs, plan, marketing plays, they will be guaranteed a zero balance each year. And then underneath it lists the camera and the lens. It was just the documentation provided to me, according to the high school. Jostens is providing a free camera to the yearbook for re-signing with them. So it's been explained to us as a donation.
But the documentation does not say a free camera. I didn't read the documentation that way, so I apologize if I read it wrong. But I saw nothing in there other than a zero balance at the end of the year. And that we were able to pay for that camera over a 3-year period. So. I'd just like a little clarification that if it is a donation, then fine, I'm fine with the donation because it's part of a contract. But also, I don't think it needs to come to the board if it's a contract amount. In other words, if we have to pay anything at all for the camera. Because the number is so small, it's just doesn't need to come to the board.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is just the information that was given to me. I'm told that because we re-signed with Jostens, They gave me the two documents. I understand that the first one that I had originally sent out was more based on a contracts and a lot of the things that you're saying. Based on my understanding, it's that second document that I had sent you in an email references the zero budget, gives the cost, gives those notes for saying if you meet these deadlines, you meet these markers, it's zero budget. So I think it's that theoretically, if we don't meet those items, there could be a cost, but if we meet those items, there would be a cost. I'd say we're far enough along in the process. Based on what I've been told that, you know, this would be a donation and not a cost item to the district. My other assumption would be is if for whatever reason it's not a donation, obviously, like you said, it doesn't actually come to the board, it just becomes part of a budgeted process.
Well, I mean. Yeah, I would disagree. I would say that, I don't know if this would be considered a donation, but sometimes, like, for instance, if we were to get that grant. Even if we were awarded that grant. We would not be able to do anything without this board accepting that grant. Granted, it's a whole lot more money than $740. But we also have a policy that talks about accepting donations. It doesn't have a low threshold on numbers, and so we've.
I think that's part of the issue is some people have looked at our donation policy. And there's no clarity, and it's, a lot of people said it's so vague that, you know, if I come in and I drop this pencil off and say, oh, I'd like the district to have this pencil, I mean, this pen, based on our policy, like. It should technically come to the board for approval, because there is no like monetary threshold, there is no language under there, so I think that this is just. A group of people wanting to do their due diligence, bringing it to the board, because. They're under the impression that things need to be donation wise approved by the board.
But on the flip side, as Charlie, I think what your point is it's probably something that was in a contract saying if you meet these thresholds, this is what you get. And so it's just part of the contract that was signed in the first place,
Correct.
which is a whole different story. For instance, like, oh, I don't know the company, BSN, I believe that we order athletic gear from. The more athletic gear that we purchase, they give us rebates. You know, we don't come to the board for approval on those rebates, kind of the same idea, or we get. Maybe not rebates, but like, hey, you've earned not this many points, so you can, I don't know, have this entire. Team outfitted with sweatshirts or something like that sort of thing, because that's part of the contract. So.
So I guess where I'm at is, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the donation if indeed it is a donation. And if it's not a donation, then and it's part of the contract, then it doesn't require the board's acceptance.
Is that a motion?
That was a motion.
I second. the motion.
Okay. Are there any questions about where we are? All right, then, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed? None, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. All right, so now we're ready for Mr. Thomas Horn to do a presentation on master library.
Excellent. So just a brief consideration before I start. This is very closely tied to policy KFR. And I realize that that agenda item is a little further down on the agenda. Wanted to put that to the board if you want me to still present now, or if you'd rather lump those together. Whichever would be your preference.
I think that makes sense.
Hmm.
I think I prefer the presentation now.
All right, then I will continue. So this past Thursday, I had the opportunity to meet with the policy committee. With some representatives from the town of Jaffrey to talk about how we handle facility and reservation requests. For use of school facilities outside of school-sponsored activities. So there's a couple of things. Mostly I want to bring you up to speed on how the software that we use, Master Library, functions, and what the workflow for users who are on the front end, what it looks like and what it feels like. So I'll do a quick demonstration through a couple of screenshots of a new account workflow, the standard reservation system that we've been using, what it would look like if the school district were to charge fees based on the existing policy, and what it would look like if the school district were to implement a more formal waiver process. And at the end, I have a couple important links that tie to the various documents that are important for this. So the new account workflow, this is very easy in how everyone starts.
And let me by everyone, you don't just mean in-house people employed by the
Correct.
district. That's an important piece of this, so that this is used by community as well.
Yes, so this would be the exact same screen that Karen Estes at the high school would go to and John Colmorgan at Jaffrey Rec. Like it's the same for both sides. With the previous software package that we were using, School Dude, there was some major differences between what party you were part of, but this is uniform across all those different groups. So very standard login page for school district users. The SAU47.org email address is tied to Google. That automatically will get you into all the Master Library suite programs that we have. For community users, they have to set up a login and look like the next slide. So here, really basic stuff, just your name, your email, contact information, what kind of group you're in, what you're representing. And the page is a bit long, so I couldn't do it in one screenshot, but the next slide shows a little bit more of where it gets nitty gritty for us. On there's a section labeled class. On my end of the software, it's called classification. And that's really where a ton of the automating power comes from in Master Library. Depending on what group a person is part of, that group can have a specific classification. That classification determines stuff like what kind of fees are charged, when fees are charged. It allows for certain days in advance that you can or cannot reserve space. It changes the approval routing for a couple of different places. And it also is an incredibly powerful reporting tool for us to be able to see how much is being used by in-house extracurriculars versus third-party events going on. Probably the biggest sticking point for people in this process is the next section, the attaching a certificate of insurance. That is something that, oh, I'm sorry, Nick, it was still on there. Thank you. That is something that is still a very manual process. That's something that people will attach and have questions on. So I get phone calls and emails about that quite a bit. At the end of the presentation, I have a standard language that we ask for on a certificate of insurance that was provided for us by our legal counsel and insurance company. And there's quite a bit of a ping pong match with those. But so far, we've been able to come to terms with anyone who wants to use our facilities. And then once all that is satisfied, they click the create a new account and you're taken to this confirmation page. The next slide shows, one second. Nick, would you do me a favor and skip to slide number 15, please? So this is a flow diagram looking at the first four items or boxes, for lack of a better term, across the top. That little segment is a different way to look at the workflow for a new user account. So the user will put in the information that they have. They'll send in a certificate of insurance. At that point, I get an email as the system administrator to say, hey, this person wants to be part of a group. It needs your approval. So that's where the back and forth with insurance comes in. Once we're satisfied there, I'll say, yep, this group is good to go. And that unlocks the door for them to start submitting requests. Until that's nailed down, they can't even get into the calendar. They can't see what's going on. That's one of the first levels of defense, so to speak, for making sure that all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And then if you go back to slide number 8, please. Thank you. Perfect. So standard reservation workflow. This is what we use 9 times out of 10. This is how it looks almost all the time. So this is just the basic interface. This is the default homepage for a new user and for any user unless they customize it. This is just their profile page. If they go to the upper right, there's that blue button for a new request. And that takes you to the next slide where you put in really just the basic location, date, and time for your event. Every event is tied to a group, which again is tied to those classifications, which governs how they interact with each other. You can put multiple sites, you can put multiple locations, you can put multiple days. There's a ton of flexibility to automate that system. When you have put in the times that you are interested in, there's the view availability button, the blue one in the bottom left. And if Nick would go to the next slide, that'll show what it looks like. It gives a pre-check without ever going to the calendar of seeing, hey, is this available or not? This only looks for conflicts in that time frame. So it's really important to capture setup and teardown. And for events that take a longer time or have a setup like in the Pratt, tapping the floor down, to make sure that those are considered throughout the rest of the approval process, because this looks purely for time and space conflicts. And then the next slide drills down a bit more. This is some more information about the event. This is where the maintenance and custodial staff get their information from. This is what's really critical for the facilities department so that we can support and help make these events successful. Working quite a bit with the various buildings and internal organizations to develop norms and expectations surrounding this. And that's been met with quite a bit of success. We're still learning, we're still getting better, but we're doing pretty well. If you go to the next slide, please, Nick. And then at the bottom, a couple really important pieces. There are terms and conditions that you have to mark specifically. I have read these and I agree to those. Those terms and conditions are the policy KFR. It's just a PDF copy of it there. And then you get to give a beautiful signature on there with a mouse. And that signature gets superimposed onto the contract that we received from our legal counsel for the binding, the binding agreement for using the facilities. For classifications that are not charged, what's really important is that blue button at the bottom. It says confirm and schedule request. So when they hit the next, when they hit that button and go to the next page, it says, you're great, you're fantastic, it is in the approval process. And then the next page shows, again, that routing system. Excuse me, I got a bit of a frog in my throat. So a little bit more information there. The two red boxes, those are the two pages that the user sees. By virtue of them signing it, we get a signed contract that lives in our files. Depending on the space for it, if it's an athletic space, such as the Pratt or the Fields, the athletic director is the first person to see it and approve it, to verify that, hey, this doesn't conflict with any of the school district's programming. After that, it goes to the building principal. Again, making sure it doesn't conflict, making sure that there aren't unforeseen pieces that the software doesn't see that a principal would. And then the last step is the facilities director to see, hey, is there manpower? Is it reasonable? Can we get the floor down and chairs up in a reasonable amount of time? Once all of those are approved, It gets posted to the calendar, it becomes public, and it's locked in, and organizations can plan on having that space in that time. Any questions? I kind of just went information, well,
So I must have missed it. Where is there capacity in there to put what your requirements are or what? things that
Yes.
you-
absolutely. It is the second page. So the second red mark there where it's event details. I believe if I can give you a slide number there, Nick.
Yep, okay.
Uh,
So that's when you
Yeah.
put in information relative to the setup or the amount of setup. you need.
Exactly. Yep. And there's a huge amount of flexibility in what we can ask for. We can put in some canned fields like saying, do you need custodian support? Yes or no? If so, what? Do you need chairs? How many? What kind of setup are you looking for that? We can also create our own customized fields. So if we wanted to say something like, do you need the floor down? We could say yes or no, and put that in there. There's still quite a bit of customization and really oiling up of the system that we need to do. But there's a lot of opportunity to capture a lot of information so that people in totally different parts of the process can see what they need to see and understand how it fits in the bigger picture.
Who decides the amount of the fee when you do charge a fee?
So that is an excellent question. It's governed by policy KFR and by the school board by extension of that. So when the school board makes a decision on what the policy is, then that will be enforced by me, I guess.
But I mean, some of these would be like you talking about setting up chairs and
Mhm.
tables and every one of these is going to be a little different.
Yep, absolutely.
And so you must have to figure in the amount of time it's going to take and how much whoever's going to, the custodians, I guess, are going to set this up, or somebody's going to set it up.
Yep.
And you have to make, and so when somebody makes a request for space, you're gonna tell them how much, this is how much it's gonna cost you. And then they can
Absolutely.
decide whether they want to do it or not, right?
Yeah. So to answer your question, I'll go through the next workflow. And then we can talk more about that question because I think that'll answer quite a few of your underlying questions there. So this is an instance where we would expect payment for using the facilities. If you go to the next slide for me, please. Again, looks very, very similar, starts out the same way. The next page that the user goes to requires that signature. They still have to sign off. But the really big difference is at the bottom of the screen where it says continue and agree to estimated costs. That is the huge piece, and that's governed by those classifications that we talked about earlier. When they click on that, they're taken to this next page. And on here, you have to confirm that you're willing to agree to these estimated costs.
Estimated cost.
Right. So this has been part of the source of contention around policy KFR and what our practice is for reserving and using space. I know that the examples that come to my mind are the Jaffrey Cub Scouts and Mount Monadnock Little League. Both of those organizations put in their year's worth of meetings, and they saw the hours times however many times they met, times the space fee, times the custodial fee. And those fees got really large. I believe for Mount Monadnock Little League, his figure was in the neighborhood of $11,000 for the amount of hours that he wanted at the Artemis baseball field. So he came to the board and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And at that point, the board decided to waive that, to say, "Yep, nope, you help take care of our fields. We won't charge you for it." And that is the board's prerogative. However, on my end, for setting up the software to try and automate this as much as possible, that poses a really big challenge. everything is governed by those classifications. So if I have Mount Monadnock Little League set up as a community nonprofit, and in the policy it says we charge $45 an hour, but it comes to the board, excuse me, before it can even come to the board, you would be confronted with this screen where it would say $250 for 2 practices, right? And justifiably, a lot of people, when they see that, pick up the phone and they call me. They're like, hey, this has never been a thing before. What's going on? And so I've walked through a couple of different groups through this process, and there's really 2 options, right? This page, by saying, yeah, I agree to estimated costs, is not binding. It's not a contract. It's not an invoice, but it is required for users to be able to put in a reservation for space. So if a group gets to this point and they're like, yeah, nope, not comfortable saying, yeah, I'm willing to pay $500, then that reservation never makes it onto the calendar. It's never penciled in, so to speak. So all of the work that they've done to build the reservation disappears. So really the practice, it needs to be determined. Do we instruct groups that could potentially be charged to agree to estimated costs with the knowledge that it could or could not be waived? Or do we say, yep, no, this is hard. And if you see the cost there, that is to be expected. And that's a decision for the board during the policy discussion.
So
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you go to the next slide, please, Nick?
on this slide, now I want to go back to the other one.
All right, let's go back one. Thank you.
If down there where you have a box that says, I agree for these estimated costs.
Yep.
Could there be a box that says, I'd like to waiver the estimated costs?
So I have been in contact with support for Master Library. They're really responsive. I asked, could we change the language in that box? Could we change the language on the blue box that's grayed out underneath it? Or could we add a box like that beside it? Currently, those are not things that I can do. That's hard coded into their software package. We can change the text, those 2 lines that you can see above it, the longer lines. We can change that to be information about what we want to do. We could put a hyperlink in there to say, if you want to submit a waiver, click here. That still doesn't change the fact that they'd have to say, I agree to estimated costs, and then click, I agree to estimated costs. That's something that the software cannot do at this point.
So at this point in time, either people say, I give up, or they say, I get in a phone call.
9 times out of 10, it's a phone call or an email. And usually fairly frustrated.
And do you have a number up there for you to call?
I have my email posted there.
Is that why you were asking to change your number?
No, that was because
Oh.
I kept getting safety and security stuff. Because my phone used to be the safety coordinator. So I would get random cold calls about security pieces. I was like, I absorb some duties, but not that.
If somebody agrees to the cost.
Mhm.
Do they have to pay up front, or do you have to bill them?
That is another decision for the board in this policy. From what I can think of, I don't believe that payment is required before an event. I don't think it's explicitly delineated in the policy. In practice, we've only had one organization pay for an event, and that was paid for before the event.
So we don't get many people to pay?
No,
Oh.
no, that this is very new and difficult for the organizations that have used space in the schools historically.
It's disappointing that the waiver cannot be linked easily here. That was a key place, because the policy does say anybody can apply for a waiver. I mean, it does say that, so we should have that easily accessible. And this shouldn't be blocking them by saying the payment. So you're right, the language does need to change for this. Can we have a second button besides the agree that says something to the effect of, I intend to apply for a waiver of these fees? period. And then confirm everything that way.
Unfortunately, no, not at this point. All of that's hard coded into the system. Oh, please, Ruben.
Similarly, this is at a very specific spot in our website. I assume there's a location that we could put a link to a Prevo form that has the way, or do we have that already?
So
That already exists, right? So I mean, it's there.
yes, so hypothetically, I could absolutely put a link on this page as well to say, per policy KFR, if you wish to petition the board to waive these fees, submit a waiver here. And the next sentence could be, in order to pencil in or put a pending reservation, it is required for you to agree to estimated costs with the knowledge that the board will be reviewing whether or not to levy those costs. I think that could work, but you still have to say twice, I agree to these costs. And I see that being a point of confusion quite a bit.
When district employees have to put forth work to make some of these events happen. As I understand it, we've been absorbing that cost. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if the baseball team, I understand they keep up the field and all that. But if we have to have custodians set up benches and chairs and all that sort of stuff, that's on their time here.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't think we should be just donating that.
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
The budget that we put forward covers facilities costs. So the town has already budgeted, or its town has supported the expense and through their own taxes. So the question remains, is this really an incremental cost that has not been paid for by the taxpayer, or is it not? Okay. And that's the question that the policy committee is working with right now, because there is a perspective comes out there that we support the community because we're funded by the community.
Yeah, I agree with that when it comes to community programs like the rec department and all that. But if it's a private group, I don't think we should be doing that.
No, and we're not. That's part of this part of it. Yeah. So how can we make, and I'm sorry, we need to make this page more conducive for those entities to do the waiver, and a link to the Fairville form could do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And the language could be written in such a way that it's not threatening to people who are.
Yeah, we can make it big and bold, say the buttons you have to click, just start to get you on the calendar. And the board will be reviewing your waiver, should you choose to submit it.
Or some simple language by clicking on this agreement stating you are not agreeing to pay it. So, something that's like you're not going to be
Yeah.
held accountable to paying it. Until you've gone to that waiver process and this facility, that sort of thing.
So my question is, let's say someone goes through this process, they see the fee, the potential fee, they get a little nervous. They say they want the waiver. They click on the agreement terms so that the information is populated on the calendar. And then we deny them the waiver. So how much of a problem is that for you to get rid of that information? I guess is the first question. And, I don't know. I don't think these requests come in very often. So it's not like someone would look at the calendar and say, oh, I wanted that night. Now it's taken. So bummer. And just to find out.
That happens more than you think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a very high demand for these spaces,
Interesting.
particularly the Pratt, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but there's a very high demand.
Do people ever reserve and then cancel?
Very, very rarely. In my experience. Nick, would you go to the next slide for me, please? There we go. So following that comment, Christine, if the board, actually, this is showing no waiver. If you go forward 2 more slides for me, please. There we go. It's getting more complicated.
Yeah.
So should the board deny that waiver, it is my understanding that the organization would want to back out of that space reservation. For your question, how hard is that? It's super easy. It's a couple keystrokes.
Okay.
I think the bigger question is if we go forward with this waiver idea, we're looking at some significant lead times.
Yeah.
Right. So an individual can be looking at it and the policy says you need 14 days. They're like, oh, perfect. I can just make it in 14 days. And then they submit a waiver. And the next school board meeting isn't for another 14 days. So they go in, they reserve the space. And it's just sitting in limbo because the waiver hasn't been approved. So it's not going to be approved by the rest of the approvers in the process. So it's just sitting there until the board's next meeting where they talk about it, deliberate, decide yes or no, and then the date has passed for that event, which I can see being a really big concern because this is a significant time commitment to implement a waiver system.
We're not talking a lot of money coming in here, are we?
Not really. We're
So-
talking maybe a couple $100.
So I think I recall that the high school has a business club. Does it not? I think I heard somebody say that. Couple,
I don't know if
not
that's
tonight, but
business
this month or
club,
so, isn't there a business club or a?
entrepreneurial. I think that they were talking about courses that they could take.
I don't think there's a club.
But I'm not sure we have a club right now.
Well, I was just thinking.
Like a Business Leaders of America or something like that, we don't have that.
Why are these even coming to the board? I was thinking you could hand it off to a group of students. Group of students that are interested in business or something, I don't know.
For me, it's important to go to the board so that we can clearly define the policy, and what the expectations
Well,
are.
the policy is one thing, but. I don't know.
This came to us and was, if that's, I'm sorry, right? Okay. Facilities brought this to us.
Yeah.
In concern because of the cost of the upkeep and the depreciation happening in our facilities
Right.
and the heavy usage. And we need to be responsible with both our community and making sure that we are serving all of our communities with all the priority levels, but also with our facilities and our very limited resources. This policy is one small way we can have full knowledge as we're going and not go forward in ignorance of the usage and the depreciation and the damage and the costs of serving the community. So by having the board have eyes on specific groups, specific priority levels, not all, but specific ones that we can help recoup any of the losses that we take. This makes good sense. You speak about the lead time, but the priority level groups that are requesting these are not the sudden school events that can happen, but are community programs and for-profit programs that should have at least a month of knowledge. It's not, none of these should be sudden things. The community groups market and publicize, and the for-profits definitely should be having lead time. So I'm not sure that, I think we really need to remember that we're not asking a waiver from everybody. We're asking it from extremely specific groups. Which we will go into more with the policy discussion coming up. But we do need to keep in mind, this isn't for everybody.
Is there an option for people who have volunteers and who want to come in and set up their own chairs?
Mhm.
Or even clean up?
So for instance, town voting, right? The agreement that we had with the town of Jaffrey for using the Pratt was that the school district staff would put down the protective floor covering and would have the tables and chairs in the Pratt to be set up, right? And then the Jaffrey DPW came in, they set up the chairs, they set up the tables, they set up all the stuff that they needed. And then when they were done, they tore down the chairs, they tore down the tables and left them in the Pratt to be picked up. So I think that's an excellent example of some cooperation going on. I know that really lightens the load on custodial staff quite a bit. And I would say in an instance like that, based on the classification, saying, hey, this is a town event. So a town event, not that we would be charging them anyway, but I could code it so that they wouldn't be charged a custodial fee. So if the Cub Scouts wanted to do something similar and it was determined by, I guess, the powers that be, that they would handle their custodial work, I could code that into not being charged, and it would just be a reservation fee.
This is something that's very interesting. Do you mind if I ask a question?
No, please.
Next to that fee.
Mhm.
Or could there be in lieu of payment? I sign off and agree to carry trash in, I carry trash out, clean up, and some sort of procedure or whatever that actually takes care of the facility, the space that they have. Like in lieu of
Absolutely.
that, so here's this. You don't even need a waiver, you're gonna just clean up
Yep.
after yourself and leave the place this. If you don't, then we'll charge you, but. I mean, I think that's not necessarily an uncommon concept, right?
Yeah.
I
So
don't know.
Daisy's got a
speaking.
I feel like
Speaking from a
That's- yeah.
scout's perspective, at least for Girl Scouts, and I'm assuming Boy Scouts are similar, the girls are taught that what you bring in, you bring out. And that if you create trash, it gets taken care of. That I think for the Scouts anyways, that makes a perfect button, blob, whatever you want to put it as, of instead of being charged the custodial fee to clean up after you, clean up after yourself. Put the chairs back where you found them, put the tables back how you found them, take care of all your trash. That I think for that point, it makes perfect sense to have that little blurb of clean up and you won't have the fee.
definitely something to consider.
Is that something that, is that even possible?
Absolutely.
With that,
On that agree to estimates page, we could put these estimates reflect the incremental depreciation for this event. In a spirit of cooperation, the school district is willing to cover those costs should the facilities be returned to the district in clean and working order. If not, the board reserves the right to levy these charges. So something like that.
That would be the question is. Let's just say there was an event at RMS. And someone spilled a soda in the gym.
let's just say this happened.
Let's just say this happened.
Purely hypothetical, right?
Purely hypothetical. And the hypothetical grown-ups in the area patted it dry with paper towels, but that's not how you clean a gym floor. Right? So they think they cleaned it up, threw away the paper towels in the trash can, all's good, but that's not clean by I mean, so that's where I'm wondering, what do we supply so that they can clean up after themselves? How do they understand how to clean it? I want it to be that people would clean up after themselves, but I don't know if it would come to the same standard that we need it to be, is my concern, but.
I do
point.
confess, I am not a fan of putting it on the payment page. I'm a big fan of putting it on the waiver. I think we have the ability to remove our own trash, to put away our tables, to even bring our own chairs. I'm a big fan of it on the waiver. That would go a long way to us saying, no, we're not gonna charge you. That would. I'm not a fan of putting it in lieu of the payment. There is a very valid place for charging. And we're not. And there, I think that the groups that we are looking to charge. I think it's a real thing. I think it's very valid. I think it's doable. I know that it says. And I don't want to go into the policy too much right now. Let's stick with this. We'll have a policy discussion. My biggest concern is that page where it says you have to pay, if we can change that language so that the link for the waiver and that the waiver says options for in lieu of payment, but that it's not mandatory. Because there might be groups that can't do that. And I won't say it's mandatory that you clean up after yourselves or pay us. That's not a reasonable thing either, but let's give them, let's make that as part of like a little checkbox. I could do that.
So one of the things we do is we ask them if they have insurance up front. If they have insurance, all right, I don't know if you've ever gone to anybody and say, hey, you did this damage, you need to fix it. But I mean, to me, that's the fallback for somebody who's does damage or mars things up and we have to fix it. So.
I mean, to me, it feels like a dilemma because we want to take care of our facilities and we see situations where compensation to the district is reasonable. Maybe even our responsibility to charge it. But at the same time, we want to be open to the community, and for some of these smaller groups, depending on how the application form is set up, it can be a real disincentive. I mean, if we look at this a year down the road and what we find is that 20% of our groups that in the past used the facility no longer do. Will we be happy with that?
Well, we don't have to decide all this tonight, right? Or do we?
I know, well,
Well, we had asked Trey to come and show us the process. Because there were community questions on how to access and the process for the payment and that piece of communication happening where you can't go further without saying I'm gonna pay. And so we needed to come before us and just say, how do we fix that piece? So I think we're good with this, with the master library. And then let's come back around to the policy later in the agenda. Does that make sense?
I don't know why you're looking at me, that absolutely.
right. I mean, the point of the presentation was to let us see how the process works.
And where that miscommunication piece is, so if you're good. prepared.
And what you showed us was a piece of the functionality of the program.
Yes.
Just as it relates to this process right here.
Absolutely. If you want, I could talk your ears off about all sorts of other pieces about it. But
That'd be
I
fun.
We have to get to that.
Yep.
Lots of nervous laughter in the room.
So, no, please. make it-
Sometime. It'd be real fun.
All right, well, thank you very much.
So thank you.
Yeah, I'm intending to step out of the meeting. Is that okay? Or would you prefer that I stay for the?
No, you have
next
to
meeting?
stay here until the very end. because,
Okay, all right.
No,
So,
just
as long
kidding,
as we're on
just
the same
kidding. No,
page.
you,
You can't escape the punishment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trey.
right.
Run now.
Oh, yeah.
and that applies to the student of the month too. You're welcome to stay here as long as you want, but you
Okay.
know that I'm real, you don't have to.
Oh, you want to stay for the next one? Oh, you do.
I do.
Oh, yes, you do. Yes, watch. Nick will put up on the board. But I'm,
Determining last day of school. Next year's calendar.
You're not referring to the school
Graduation day.
district calendar and when the end of school.
she's a junior. She's gonna want to see this.
Yeah, she'll want to see this.
Okay.
And what we're doing, what we're planning on doing for class next year.
There you go.
See, huh?
We need a motion on these.
For the
Action.
calendars, yes, absolutely, yep. So if we can. Are we on action items then?
Yeah, yes.
So we have two school calendars to talk about, one this year's and two next year's. This year, because we have to plan the end of school. Now, we are still in the midst of, even though today's spring, we're still in the midst of potential inclement weather and could have some other problems, but more than likely, if we do have some, we'll have the ability to do some more remote work. Which even if we have like a day or two in advance notice, we can be able to do that. So we have had 5 snow days, I guess you could call it, that did not have that remote learning element to it. We did have 1 remote learning day that would not be something that we would even need to have a conversation about. It is important to note that we go by hours and not by days. And so while we have days within teacher contracts, we go by hours within student learning. And so we are in need of more hours in the secondary school than we do in the elementary school. Certainly, we want to send the message that education is important and that missing those days is something that we need to, we miss learning during that time frame. More specifically this year, because in the past couple of years, due to COVID and some other maybe some other stressful situations, we sometimes have just gone with that hours type of approach. This year, a lot of our days came toward the end of the first semester, which then the first semester in our secondary schools got prolonged, which means that if we don't make up those days in the second, we're shortening the second semester. So making up some days is my recommendation. Now, I recommend that you see that 15th, which is the after the last day, it's an unencumbered day for the teachers. What I'm recommending is that we make up school days on the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th, and have as the last day for teachers, the 16th. Now, the 19th, we know from our conversation this morning, I guess we have cranes.
Good things
So
coming.
we have
Right.
heavy equipment and so forth, and so it actually would benefit us not to have people within the area. Both for, well, there are two major reasons why. But anyway, so that would be my recommendation, that we keep the graduation date so that we can let people know ahead of time. People are always asking around this time, when is graduation, when is graduation? Keep it on the 9th. We're allowed to do that 5 days prior, because as long as if we were to go into the next week, like say we had student learning on the 19th school, we would have to change our graduation date. So that still allows us to have our graduation on the 9th. We go in, and actually what it does nicely is it also allows our learners such as Amriel here, who are juniors and going, ooh, I can't miss school. I don't want to. I gotta learn. Gives them that extra time to learn. extra time to make some assessments up perhaps as well. But also it provides the elementary school and the middle school time to be able to stagger their end of year celebrations or graduations, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to cramming them all in toward that 7th, 8th, and 9th. Because,
4 schools in 1 week's not easily doable.
it's not doable if you want to have, for instance, sound, right? So it makes a difference when you have, RMS a half an hour starting, before JGS does, and we're shifting back and forth. I'd really like to actually stay at both of those for the entire time. I think that's important, rather than to make one organization or community feel less important, because I have to go somewhere else. So I think that works out well for us if we go that avenue. And I think we technically still lose a day, but we're well in the realm of hours that way. And it makes up, I think it gives people what they need.
I think it's important for the school board too. Because when you have RMS and JGS at the same time, board members from their communities show up, but the full board doesn't show up. I think I used to go to JGS and then to RMS, but I haven't done that in quite a while.
I know
Which
that,
one?
oh, I'm sorry. Were you done?
I am.
Okay. I believe that guidance was talking about, with Alma being in place, that would allow us to have some real step up days. And seems like we might be able to schedule those in that week. Hopefully.
Yeah, certainly. Even if we were going to schedule, like say we schedule the week before, it would just, it's gonna be taking away from certain learning experiences. So
Right.
if you can schedule it later, then absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I do believe that Alma, just as a side note, implementation, that piece seems to be going in stride.
Oh,
So
good.
hopefully that will have that portion of it.
Does it get in the way of the reasoning with the days and the hours to make the 14th a half a day? Can that be a half a day instead of a full day for students?
Well, what I would be suggesting is the 15th be the final day for learners
So the color code
but.
carries one more day.
Okay.
And so we'll go one more day, but if you wanted a half day, that's fine.
If we could do that, I
Yeah.
think that.
Yeah.
It's a better pill to swallow, I guess.
Yep.
That's,
Yep.
I mean, I have no problem with the days added, but
Sure.
half a day and the last day makes nice sense in general.
We are just because we're on the conversation of remote days, half days and all that kind of stuff. We are looking, because we have an entire week prior, I'll be sending out communication tomorrow, and then we'll have school send out communication about half day, like the next Tuesday's events. We will have full days. During that time frame, we don't have inclement weather happening. We have enough time to plan for that sort of thing. Remote days will still be different, a little bit, but we're trying to also create some equity between the teachers and the school days as well. So we'll make it palatable, but it will be a little bit more than what we typically do on a snow day or some day, where we have a day plan. And then you have you have a foot of snow that you have to deal with as well. Or travel to go a place. If you're a teacher, sometimes people can travel here to use the internet for that purpose. So our teachers will be in the buildings by and large on those days. So the motion that I would ask is just to make the 16th the final day. And for teachers, the unencumbered day for teachers, and the 15th half day for the final day for our learners in the district.
So the 16th be the unencumbered day.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
I will make the motion to accept the 2022-23 calendar as amended, with the 16th being the final day for teachers and the 15th being the final half a day for students.
Sorry.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Charlie. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I,
Aye. Okay. Very good.
I believe that gives us a number of days also that we need to make up for the contract for JRSSA employees, so that timeframe works out well.
Great.
Here is the next calendar.
So the 23-24 calendar, we've looked at some drafts, we've toyed with it a little bit since then, and then realized that all of our exciting efforts to do something different sometimes don't work. And I'll explain that. So August, I do see something that we may have missed a little bit. And it was really my fault that I asked Nick to change something really fast before this meeting so that you would have something to look at. We're looking, after talking with the association, sometimes we've had the unencumbered day on the 29th. And so originally that's what we had on this calendar. But the idea of having the teachers come, be able to settle into their classes, get in, do their unencumbered day on the first day, is desirable for a couple of reasons. The elementary later on, say the 29th or so, tends to have open houses, and so they want to make sure that everything is really all in place and not having to rush and do that. Also, it just gives, if you look at this 22nd and the 23rd, which would be the suggested new teacher orientation days, it gives those new teachers then a day to also acclimate things in a very casual way, perhaps less structured way with their mentors, with other people in their departments and so forth, and just let people get their minds in their own timing back into the upcoming year before the 3 days of professional development. So changing the language there for the 25 to the 29th, I think that would be a teacher workshop day. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just, we originally had it as the 29th, so I flipped it. I just forgot to change 25 to 29 to say teacher workshops.
Yeah,
So that's
20, so that would be what we would have to change that language, but that's the idea. The unencumbered day would be on the 24th. And the 25th through the 29th, not the weekend, but those will be professional development days or teacher workshop days is the language we would use.
So we wouldn't have anything on the 30th?
The 30th is the first day of school.
Okay.
That's the purpose.
And where is the Alma training in this?
It's gonna have to be within that 25th, 28th, 29th timeframe.
But it's not a set. That'll be set by building principals. So,
Once we're further along, probably in June, we'll know best what teachers need and different groups are gonna need different types of training.
Mhm.
So office staff is gonna probably need, for instance, and office staff wouldn't fit into the unencumbered day necessarily. They might get all day training on the 24th, for instance, on that aspect, although they're getting training as they're going right now. Teachers for their training, it would be within that time, the 25th, 28th, 29th. Leslie would probably be part of that training. Adele, maybe some of the principals. But within that time frame, it's gonna be necessary. More so for the secondary than the elementary. So you'll see that there's a day, Labor Day is the 4th. This follows a 3, 4, 5 kind of step model. So 3 days the first week, 4 days the second week, 5 days the third week, and then you kind of go into that.
mhm.
It's nice. You probably see preschool starting after Labor Day. Kindergarten starting before Labor Day. And then October, we were actually wanting to have this, so the 9th would be here Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, whichever you were going to call it, but we would have that day off. That was strongly requested. Also, we were going to have a PD day on the 6th of that month because we had one that we had a place for at this point in time, but realized that we don't know when the New Hampshire primary voting is. And so in this calendar, we suggest a floating professional development day until we find out what that date is, so that we can put that on the voting day. So it's too bad. I actually would have liked to have had that early PD day in October, but it's just not going to take place. Anything that's in that kind of brownish, yellow, gray, the 18th, the October 18th is for. Those are those early release days for the elementary only, very similar to what they are this year. No additions to what we have had this year.
Their primary day. 23.
No. I don't think they've
There's
released
no-
the
There's
date.
no official date yet.
There's
There
a
is a
recommended
primary.
date by the
There is a
DNC.
primary, yeah, presidential primary.
Oh, but that won't be till 24, right?
This is the 23-24 calendar.
Yeah, but you're talking October of 23. I don't think there's a primary.
Oh, right. The reason why we're not putting it in October of 23 is because we want to save it
Oh.
for the
Gotcha.
winter,
For when you do need.
the
Okay.
early winter in 24, yes. Yeah. Yes, Nick?
Yeah, that was, so we presented a calendar in last board meeting. What Ruben's saying is that the two changes between the calendar we presented last meeting and this calendar is the switching of the unencumbered day from the end to the beginning. And then this change that we originally had a PD date in October, and that's now been shifted to sometime in February. So those are just the two major changes that have occurred between last time and this time.
Can I ask about just put something out there about the early release dates? You have mentioned at different times that, that has been very conducive for the schools, very productive for the schools. Is there any reason we can't include the middle school in that this year coming up?
Well, the reason why we do it for the elementary is because the middle school and the high school have more built-in time than the elementary does. And so this is an opportunity to give them some concentrated time. Oh, we had talked about obviously the high school is the one that would be the bigger deal because of the Conval relationship and the Messinic relationship, not to have half days. Middle school,
Also, doesn't secondary require more hours than elementary?
they do require more hours.
And we have a very limited number of snow days next year.
Yeah, and I'd have to talk, it's a good question, because it doesn't equate to the high school. But the purpose for the elementary was always to give them time that they don't have during their weeks, so forth. But we can talk, we can have more conversations.
Especially in light of Alma starting, I know from my experience with it, it takes a great deal of time to do grading and that, and to the process of that, it takes a lot of time. And so having that with such a major initiative starting, I think it's a good, you've had real success in having these communities of professionals getting together at the elementary level. I think moving it up the ranks makes really good sense to me, but.
Well, and that's something that we could, make a decision. Even a month, 2
Regardless,
months down
yeah.
the road, exactly.
Mhm. Yeah.
So then. The only thing that I think that on this calendar that is really that is different or had some sort of member or two were questioning was the 22nd of December. We are proposing it to be off. There was conversation at the board level to make that a half day.
That was me. Just so you know.
Well, you brought it up, but other people might agree with it, and it was a conversation at the Conval and the Scenic timeframe. So I think that one of those schools is going to choose to do a half day.
We make a compromise in elementary not have 4 half days and give a whole district half day on the 22nd.
That would be
Half days
hysterical.
are really hard for elementary parents when there are so many of them they rely on the older siblings as childcare. But there is no childcare because the older siblings are still in school.
I think we really need to reach out to some of our community partners and let them, give them a heads up that these half days are gonna happen and encourage them to put together some reasonably priced activities on those days, whether it's Jaffrey and Ringe Rec, or even I was thinking Mrs. Lindstad's, what was Be Active, the Franklin Pierce students,
Mhm.
if they could do something in the gym.
Yep.
I mean, I think if we put a little bit of planning into it, it could be, because you're just talking about 3 hours, something that is either free or reasonably priced through rec.
It could definitely give us an opportunity to do some experimentation and not in a bad way, like not, just like, let's try some different programming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to Be Active is, I mean, we're starting that for the next 2 months, we're gonna be doing a before school program in both rooms. Not 5 days a week, because we're gonna have to split doing what you're saying. We have some Franklin Pierce students who are gonna be doing that work. And we're gonna collect some data, behavioral data, other types of data during that time frame to show whether that sort of thing is meaningful. But even if it's not, even if it's not providing, those outcomes, to your point, safety and a good setting for childcare where parents can know, hey, I don't have to worry about, for the most part, don't have to worry about things that can be active, you might trip and fall. Running around, but
In our JGS
in
hallways.
general, you're going, in general, you're going to feel like people are gonna be safe.
And of course, the libraries, letting them know
Mhm.
that there will be grade schoolers out at noon. So they could.
So they
schedule.
don't plan their professional development and close the library the same day that we have a half day.
Precisely.
That was
To happen.
terrible planning. I think that was the December one that we just had. Our half day was the same day that Jaffrey Library did their professional development and the library was closed.
Okay. And then end of the year is very similar. I was thinking like 7th for graduation in June, but I'm thinking, why don't we just make it the 21st? Like a week after everyone else is done. Let's just do that.
You are so.
Yes.
kind.
I think next year's seniors would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm sure mine
We
would.
can give
I'm
them-
sure we would.
Well, one thing it would do is,
There you go.
one thing it would do is it would not have us so tight on snow days. I mean, we've had plenty of snow days if we needed them.
That's true.
Hmm.
So there you have it.
You better get a movement started. I think.
Oh, bad luck was precious.
Does anybody else want to have a half a day on December 22nd?
I'm okay with it if it's decided now, but deciding a week before does not work.
A half a day as opposed to no school?
Right, doesn't that protect us for a snow day later? Like, isn't that an easy way to protect us for?
Well, and they can then have their Christmassy
Right.
parties and they're not academically
They're not
doing
gonna be
much on the
there.
last
Yeah, I get it.
day. That they can
get it.
just kind of have the morning to do all their stuff.
Mhm.
And then go home and families then have the afternoon to start their travel a little bit earlier and
And it is 4 days before actually. Christmas.
Yeah, I'm
I'm okay with doing a half day if it's district wide.
You're good?
Hmm.
All right, then I make a proposal that we accept this calendar as amended to the 22nd being a half a day instead of a full day.
I'll second the motion.
So that, and we'll just make the adjustments to the end of the year as a result. That-
To what?
Well, if you put a day in there, then everything else at the end gets shifted, everything except graduation.
So does that mean that the
Last day would be.
after last day becomes the 14th? Is that what you're
Potentially,
saying?
yes.
The, I didn't, the what last day?
So the number June 17th, that read,
Yeah, that would become the 14th
yes, that I really want this half a day.
and the
The
11th.
idea of making teachers, I'm sorry, the idea of making teachers come back on that Monday,
Mhm.
I would prefer them leaving on Friday.
But would that also make your last day of school Monday, the 10th instead of the?
It would,
That's a problem. The last day of school would be a Monday.
That's without snow days, so.
You know you're getting snow days.
well, but look, we're gonna have snow days and we'll be shoving
It's,
that 17th back into the following week anyway. Possibly.
But only if there's 3 snow days. So as long as we can plan semi accordingly.
Yeah, no, I mean, we certainly did more than we wanted to this year, but. Lots of electrical outages. Can't do much with that.
Any more discussion on this? We've got a motion and a second.
I really don't think we can make the proposed last day of school a Monday. I don't think anybody would show up. We would get laughed at. So if that means we have to make the 22nd a no school day, then I think that's. I mean. Can't make the last day of school a Monday.
You'd rather them go to school an extra day than have the last day on Monday?
I don't know who would show up. I can't even imagine trying to get my children out of the house. I mean, one would be graduated, but the other two, hopefully, the other two, I can't imagine saying, come on, guys.
So I cannot imagine. It's a school year where we don't have any snow days.
That's true. Oh, boy.
We try to at least have the one. Snow day where
Yeah, the fun one.
the fun one, we just had too many fun ones this year.
They weren't fun.
No, they weren't fun at all. That's why.
They were fun to the little kids who got to watch their pets literally go out and disappear. They thought that was the greatest thing ever to open the door and dog goes, dog is gone. And then you just see the snow
Yeah.
flying as the dog is moving, but you can't actually see the dog. Yep, she had a blast with that.
I guess if we presume there will be a snow day, then I'm okay with it. And being the proposed last day of school.
All right, so then-
Well. Just to make certain. That. Accounts. Right, for the floating. PD
Mhm.
day,
Yeah, so what we did was we had the 7 PD days and it was originally Columbus Day. I just stuck it on February 6th for now. It's a potential presidential primary, obviously, whatever date it is, we just lock it in when we know. I think the 6th is the most, I think that's the DNC's recommendation, but I know the state's trying to fight it, so I don't know when that gets locked in, but my assumption would be is that if the board agrees to this calendar, we would just move that when it's decided.
okay,
We wouldn't have to bring it back to the board. So just to make sure we're aware of everything, we're changing this language. Oop. We're changing this language right here from encumbered day to teacher workshops. We are putting in language here to make this a half day. This will be finalized whenever it's finalized. And then the last day of school gets moved up to the 10th, and then everything else just gets moved up one day at these, these last couple events. Those are all the proposed changes to the current calendar.
And if you can put down, this will be finalized whenever it gets finalized. That would be cool too. Just whenever.
Any more discussion? No. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Okay, very good.
And that was with the graduation on the 21st. That's what you all heard.
That's
Yeah.
what I heard.
The 21st, right? No, it wasn't the 21st. So with the 7th and waiting to see what the snow days will be, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Well, now, I guess we're pretty much ready for adjournment,
Uh-huh.
but, oh no, policy review. All right,
I would like to break these up for voting, please. So I would like to
Okay.
break up the first two. And have a vote on EHB and EHBR records retention for a second reading. I would like to make a motion that we accept EHB and EHBR as presented.
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Charlie. Any discussion? Then all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? None. Okay, that passes 6-0.
Nick, could you please open GATA?
GADA.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So this was brought to our attention that we actually don't have this policy right now. And it is a priority required by law. And so the writing that we have is directly from the New Hampshire School Board Association, and the policy committee did not see any reasons that this was not appropriate for us. So we simply want to bring this forward for us to accept as read. Not that we didn't have this covered, like you can see, it's related policies. We have all the related policies. We are covered in this. It's just their legal counsel said this was also something we should have in writing. And so we're simply adding it in. It's not that we're not doing it. It's simply the language was approved by their lawyers and this, it seems appropriate. I'll make a motion to accept GATA for first reading.
I'll second the motion.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Daisy.
You too.
Okay, so question,
Need a motion?
are you asking to forego the second reading and just adopt it? Because if you're doing that, then we would need a motion. Otherwise, it's first reading and,
Yeah, I was just gonna do first reading.
okay,
We are covered in this.
so we don't
so-
even need a motion.
Okay.
Then we'll just go on for second reading.
Hmm.
But if you want it, you can make the motion too.
I think we're good.
I would suggest that we just go ahead and do it because it's required by law. There's
then-
not much,
Then it's just done.
It's
there's not
pretty,
much the board can do between the first and second reading.
Make a motion, Charlie.
Well, this,
I'll make a motion to accept GADA.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Thank you both for the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Well,
just that there needs to be a T in the, in the bottom, the very bottom of the, that it's just a spelling error
in the policy itself.
in the school board policy. School board association policy.
Yeah.
Final number,
I usually go through these anyway.
Yeah.
And
that's all.
scrub stuff like that. Unfortunately, the school board association policies sometimes have like small little errors, so.
interesting. Okay, well then. The motion, all those in favor Please.
Aye.
and opposed? So that carries 6-0. Okay. And
KFR. I want to go through a little bit of the history as briefly as possible, seeing as it's late. We adopted KFR in October 3rd, 2022. We are bringing it back to the table because of some small, what we really needed to really be considerate of the priorities, especially that we were choosing. And we had a lot of discussion over months with policy committee, and then brought it to the school board where we had a lot of discussion about the priorities. We would like to edit them a little bit due to some small openings, small gaps that were foreseen, that we can make things a little more clear. So what we did was, as a policy committee, we asked the local town managers and town rec departments, who are the main people that this would affect, to come join us at a meeting and talk to us about their needs for our facilities, our needs for their programming, and just make sure that we were all on the same page, meeting each other's needs and understanding this. Prior to this, so what's showing right now is the current edits. Prior to this edits, the recreation department in particular in the town office were automatically at a no waiver status. That became a problem as we looked at it, because there are rec department in particular programs, but potentially town programs as well, that could really damage our resources. But also we're getting profit involved. So there's more profit happening with those organizations that we weren't seeing any income from. So there was kind of a gap happening, and we just wanted to be on the same page and figure out our waiver process, bringing Trey in. How do we do this? And John Leclerc came to the meeting. Facilities wanted to make sure that all these pieces were hearing each other. What we came to was an interesting place. One thing we discovered is that and please know, only Jaffrey was able to come to the meeting. The Ringe folks were not. So we're going to go with the Jaffrey information, though this affects Ringe. One thing we found out is that the Ringe Rec Department has a waiver system similar to what we are proposing, where the town, when it wants to use rec department facilities, applies for a waiver of the fees. And this is Jaffrey now. I don't know Ringe's process. And the rec department waives them. But they actually are very comfortable going through both master library. They all are comfortable with that system that Trey showed us. They've been using it for a while now, and with the waiver system. And so we thought one way to address that particular small gap is to change our priorities a little bit, and to put the rec department in a waiver situation. And we talked to the manager of the rec department. He said, absolutely, I'm cool with that. That's not a problem. They're comfortable with that. So they would be included in priority 6 and 7, which are our expected fee priorities. First of all, any questions on that? There's more to this, but any questions and discussion on that piece?
So they're in the waiver category?
They would be in the paid
They're
category,
in the paid.
in the fee category, the rec department.
Yeah.
With the scouts,
Mhm.
like we had put scouts in there. And for some reason, we kept the rec departments not there. And that was something we wanted to look back on. And so when we talked with them, they said, yep, let's do this. Yeah, we can apply for this. That's an easy thing for us to go through as well. And that covers us for those programs where they are getting there is a profit coming in. Now, the Jaffrey has a percentage when there's a for-profit using their programming and that they're advertising their programming. It's a 70% to the contractor, 30% to the rec department. But again, our facilities, our Pratt, our fields get nothing in those situations when there's a profit being made. Now, please remember, in 90% of those profits, it's our kids paying that. And when this came before the board, before the policy committee, we wanted to be very clear that should this come to a point where we start charging these contracted groups and they start putting those fees higher onto the students, our kids, that's not okay with us. Like, that's not why we're doing this, to increase what a kid has to pay so that our custodial, so that was a big concern. But not all the programs are student-based and kid-based. So there's things like the craft fair and, the 250th coming up. And there's things coming up that are not particularly student-based. And so we wanted to make sure that any gaps were kind of covered. The waiver simply means the explanation goes in there, including, is this a profitable entity that's using the property? Well, that should come before the board and we should have a discussion. How much of a profit is there going to be and should we get a piece of that? I to be crass, excuse me, but our facilities are being really, you guys have all seen it. We really need to be responsible for what we have.
Okay.
Next piece. We needed to look at our priority listings because as Trey explained, when people come in and use the calendar, oftentimes he feels he is in a conundrum of who to give to first. Do I give it to athletics or do I give it to town elections or town meetings? Sometimes there are situations where people do not get in, even though they might know on the calendar when it is, they don't really think ahead and put it in the calendar. And so all of a sudden, important things are being bumped because of our priority list. And so we had to have a discussion about what we do prioritize. At the time, what our current policy says is that all town events come before athletic events. But we looked at that and realized that's probably not a good plan. Probably town meetings and elections are meetings. Charlie, hopefully any town meeting means a voting body. Okay, so that does need to come first. We have to set our schools aside because we have to protect, but there are other town events that happen that can have a lower priority than our athletics. So we separated out a little bit clearer, again, trying to address these gaps. And to reiterate, priority 6 and 7 are the only ones that would be charged, and that's still in that's been edited in this policy. That's been edited. Just the numbers are corrected in this policy. 6 and 7 are the only ones that would have potential charges.
Does it say that explicitly in the policy?
It says, yes, but is that still highlighted in the further down?
Yeah, it's
It is.
been
Fees
adjusted
and payment right there.
to 6 and 7.
Right there. Thank you.
I have a wording question. Maybe it's not relevant, maybe it is.
We were pretty tired by this point, so go ahead.
When it comes to priority 2, and we say Jaffrey and Ringe town meetings, should that language maybe be more specific or vague to specific to voting, but vague enough to cover all voting events. Cause I just would hate to have somebody read town meetings as like, oh, well, I'm having some sort
A
of
chamber thing or something.
town related meeting that's like some sort of town event
Yeah.
that is a meeting.
Mhm. Charlie, you got that one?
Town meetings, even in SB2 town. Okay, it's called a town meeting and it covers deliberative session and the actual voting. And in Jaffrey, it covers, because they're still in the old town meeting. It covers their town meeting as well as their election day. So the official words are town meetings as far as the state's concerned.
And I
I
think,
understand what you're saying there, but it,
Yeah, I understand that this is the correct terminology for town meetings regardless of SB2 or an actual town meeting. I just didn't know if.
I think in priority 4, that does address that. By saying non-election related uses. I think it covers that.
Okay.
I'm sure that the application will discriminate between the two. And we also,
Yeah.
we also had a discussion around waivers and we felt that at this point in time, the best thing to do was to get waivers in front of the board. So we understood the impact of the fee schedule and we understood who was actually needed waivers and who didn't.
Another piece of this is there are entities waiting for this policy right now. There are entities that this affects immediately. Because we passed this policy in October, I would like to request that we pass it tonight. And that that we basically grandfather in spring activities that are literally starting right now, as far as the waiver. The waiver is not in place yet, the way we need it to be in Master Library. I would like this to start June 1st. And I would like the priorities to start now for the calendar. But I would like to have any fee expectations related to this start June 1st. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I would like to pass this tonight so that those entities can be on the calendar correctly, because that's filling up quickly.
Discussion?
Is that a motion?
No,
Not yet,
not
nope.
yet. But I think we can still have some discussion.
no.
Okay,
It's a
so
big ask.
I would say that I would like the time to review this. Because I have concerns about us fixing a problem that may not be a large problem with a solution that could be a larger solution. And I have a number of questions that I really don't have time, if we move it forward to a vote tonight, to explore. One of them is the usage of the priority system. Is this, going to imply that the board will establish the priorities? We look at the priority if a town meeting comes in, does it automatically take preference over a non-election related use? If so, why does it, how does the board get involved? It says the school board reserves the right to determine the priority.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
I can, because again,
Please.
we've talked to this for a long time. So the board sets the priorities as far as helping the calendar. We don't touch it again. Once we set this tonight, we don't touch anything. The calendar sets it then. Right now, what's happening is Trey is having to look at one group saying, I scheduled this a week in, except another group scheduled it 2 weeks before and thought that they had it, but this other group takes priority, and there was just some confusion between some town and athletic things happening. This clarifies better for him. It doesn't change much, but we set the priority and then we don't touch it again. Like nobody comes to us and says, I want a different priority. That completely goes to Trey. And if he has major questions, then he'd say, oh my gosh, I need help with this. But this happened because he had major questions coming in, like this isn't clear enough. Between
Sure.
the election and the meeting stuff, you know?
He had major questions coming in. He wasn't the only one getting those questions. I think. Speaking for myself, I know the questions that come to me, why are you doing it this way? The town manager spoke to me at one point and asked me to bring this forward. I've spoken to some people, staff people at the town, at the end of town meeting, and they weren't clear on where this was going. And, it seems to me it seems to me a very important policy, not something that we should move forward on without, normal consideration. It's like you say, the second time that we're changing this. It's been changed a couple of times in the administrative process too. The master library, even before the master library was in, I was asked to come in and discuss how the Fravo forms would be changed to try and facilitate this. This is back in, I don't know, maybe September or something. And then, just looking at, I guess I just say, I think it's really important we get this right. It seems to me at least like one of those small items that could be a big negative impact. And I think we should make sure that we've got it as close to right as possible. And you've asked for a couple of things like we'll start changing the fees to June 30th or June 1st.
That's in June 1st, once
I
spring
think things like
sports
that.
and things are done and.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very appropriate to say, while we're trying to sort this out, let's make changes so that we're not stuck. That makes a lot of sense to me. But in terms of looking at this, I think we should take the extra 2 weeks. That's my personal take on it at least.
I think that one of the things that I'm a little fuzzy on is the idea of first come, first serve. You get your reservation in there, you're a small group, you're not a town thing, you get your reservation in there well ahead of time. You do this event every year, when you want to have it, you get your reservation in, and then all of a sudden you get bumped because you're not high priority. It doesn't somehow seem fair. I like the priority system, but it's and most of these big ones, like the towns, they know well ahead of time when they're going to have these meetings. And they could easily make a reservation ahead of time, but other people might want to make ahead of time too, and they're going to get bumped. And when do you bump them? At the last minute? You can't do that.
Well, the bump actually happened exactly what you just described. The town meeting was not put on the schedule. And there were some important practices that all of a sudden had to get bumped because town meeting is a priority. So that's exactly what happened. So we needed to have, things happen. I mean, people are human and they forget things and things get busy, but.
There's also examples of running events that happen every week. So for example, every year, our deliberative session happens on a Wednesday at RMS. Based on the amount of time that we need to set up, there's a karate event that happens every Wednesday. So they have to get bumped to a different location or a different day, even though they're perpetually in the calendar. Just because they can't overtake the gym because we need it for voting.
So let me ask this question. If there was a private for-profit group that wanted to use the facility and they want to request a waiver, whoever it is, but they don't live in Jaffrey and Ringe, would we allow them to, we would make an exception and allow them to speak to the board?
I don't know why not.
Because we
Yeah.
typically only Jaffrey and Ringe people are allowed to speak.
Yeah, this says, this doesn't designate the towns, just says for profit entities.
Thank you for putting
We
all
could
of
get
this
lots
work
of
into
money
it.
from a Colorado group coming in to speak and wanting to, is like, that's, I'll take money.
So just for information, I don't know whether Lisa said, she did say that the Jaffrey rec manager was there, but the Jaffrey town manager was also there,
Mhm.
John Fredericks, and he participated in the discussion and laid out the needs of the town as well. So that helped us determine priorities.
Yeah, they were instrumental. He was instrumental in our conversation about separating the election from the non-election events. Yeah, it was a very good conversation.
I mean, the result is that these towns just need YMCA or whatever. There needs to be some other place in this town besides the Pratt and our gyms for these community events. Not that we can change that, but as our communities grow and we build more houses, we just need that space someplace.
Well, we need a new wellness center that, you know, they can have a Pratt.
So John provided.
Our graduation's 7.
So it's funny you mentioned the wellness center. I think I mean, I'm getting convinced that it really is, you know, something that would be great for us, but it becomes sensitive to the community support and, you know, I may be wrong on this, maybe it, and by the way, I'm not arguing against anything that's been presented here, but I would like the time to consider it. I mean, even since I made my comments, I've heard a couple of other, you know, I think what Forbes asked is reasonable, but also the, you know, the question about an out-of-town group. Normally, I would think, oh, no, if it's an out-of-town group, why should we, even though they're a nonprofit, why should we support them? Except if they're coming in to do a program for a rec department and they're doing it at a lower price because they don't have to pay for a facility, so they can charge something that's affordable for our kids. I mean, those things are all factors of consideration, and part of it is public relations too. Even it's, you know, it's like perception is as important as fairness. So. And, you know, as I tied it to the wellness, because I just thought, yeah, if we want to get support for doing some of the kind of things we're talking about, we want to make sure that we continue to be seen as a community resource, not as, well, they're trying to get a couple of $1,000s out of us to supplement their budget.
I just don't see how you can bump somebody who's had a reservation for a couple of months. Hey, I've had this reservation since August. Why are you bumping me? Well, you're not high in the priority. Well, that doesn't seem fair to me.
Well, it's not gonna be fair if you get bumped by something that has a higher priority. What we tried to do is we tried to look at those things which could change dates and those things which had dates locked in that we could not change. And those were given the priority. For example, graduation. We locked that date in for a specific purpose, and people like travel reservations, and so forth, based on that. So we don't want to cancel that from Jaffrey and Ringe town meetings. Those are scheduled by the state, not the town. And we can't change those. School basketball games and events, those things are scheduled and we can't change that, easily. But as you go down the priority list, you find out that, gee, some of these things are things that can be changed to another night. Can be changed, they don't have to just get, they can be moved around. So that's one of the things we put into establishing priorities.
One of the things that Trey also pointed out in his presentation is that one of the early on steps in requesting a space is that there's that check availability feature. So when you're arranging to look at a space, you type in the space that you want to use and the date, and it immediately gives you that designation that says this is or is not in space. Speaking from personal experience, I'm a district employee. I went to schedule the deliberative session in advance. This is an event we already had. It wouldn't let me schedule it because there was already that karate event in place. I'm a higher priority, but it wouldn't let me just overwrite that immediately because I'm a higher tier. So that overwriting ability, I think, is more of a administrative function of, oh, Jaffrey's town meeting's not in the system, but there's a basketball practice. Okay, we're gonna have to move basketball practice to the Ringe gym because this particular event is higher on the tier list. I just want to make sure that people know it's not just like an immediate, oh, because I have higher access, somebody has higher access, it just immediately overwrites.
Okay, so I don't think we have a motion yet, right? About what we're gonna do.
No, I simply asked for the consideration to remove the first reading and simply go ahead, but if people are not comfortable with that, we can wait to 2 weeks. We're talking about waiting the 2 weeks with a potentially turned overboard. And this has been a very big conversation for all of us for the last year. So that, please consider that as well. I'm not trying to push. I just know that the calendar is filling up and this priority list would definitely help, Trey.
I guess I'm thinking there's enough human element in this to work with people, work with organizations if they do have to get bumped to help them find another place, another time. It's not just an automatic
Right, they're not getting deleted.
robot doing this, so. I will make the motion that we accept this. KFR policy, is that what it's called? As its final reading.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Forbes. Thank you, Dave. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Nick has,
Does this take into account all of the other things that Lisa was saying, or is this just pure policy approval?
No,
for motion purposes?
So the only other thing I was saying was to postpone the payment things for till June 1st. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you had brought that up and you'd also brought in grandfathering and certain things.
That by postponing the payments till June 1st, that would have grandfathered.
yeah, I guess
Yes.
my motion
Yeah.
is trusting of the committee.
And I would just add to your thing about the human element, that goes for the waiver as well. And Trey's gonna work on the language to make that clearer, that this is a conversation, this is something that's, don't just get stopped by this view of the cost.
Right, right.
Okay, so we're ready to vote? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye,
I,
and opposed. And I'm gonna abstain. So that 5-0-1. All right,
Did we skip over the school board public meeting time?
Yep.
Action item on purpose? Or was I wandering?
We did.
we did skip over it, not on purpose.
So I was just going to suggest that we start at 6:30, have a half hour non-public. Set 6. If the board was interested in doing that, and then, of course, if you need to go into non-public again afterwards, do so.
I'll make that motion. That we,
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any discussion? If not, all those in favor, who signify by saying aye,
I,
aye. Opposed, none. All right. Board committee updates. So, I guess I would propose that similar to last time we met, then that we just get updates from committees that have had a meeting. Don't have to duplicate it. You've already discussed what you met about it and achieved last time or earlier in the meeting. And then if you haven't met, just, since the last time we met, then just say that. If that works. Finance,
Finance has not met, we've postponed until March 30th.
yeah, very good. Wellness has not met since last time, right? Education is,
they met, we talked about the behavior numbers. For the most part, they were down from last year. With the exception of February. And a lot of that has to do with cell phones. And that their phones are back out more, they're not paying attention in class, when they're asked to put their phone away. They're not so politely just, okay. But that was pretty much it, was the cell phones were the biggest problem in February. Or what caused most of the problems.
At the high school and middle school?
Yes.
Do you have the same problem in high school?
It was for the middle and high school.
Middle and high school.
were there any suggestions about how to address it? Just floating the problem at this point and considering.
Is there a general policy or is it up to each teacher? How they handle that?
I do not know.
Yeah, I believe a letter was sent home maybe a month ago. That clarified the policy. It does have some, there is some autonomy with the teacher if they are going to utilize a cell phone for educational purposes, that allows for that to happen. Otherwise, they are not to be out.
Cause I know one of the education committee meetings, the I don't remember which one it was, but one of the cohorts. They had done the Jaffrey Rail Trail and they were using their cell phones for different distance measurements and that kind of stuff that at that time, your phone can be out because we were actively using it. Otherwise, they're not supposed to have their phones.
One of the dilemmas of our time, right?
Yes. There was also a brief conversation about February was also the pretty near week-long snow week. That when major schedule changes happen, behaviors happen. So that may have accounted in some of them was just the abnormal schedules.
You have the end of the semester.
Yep.
So lots of things happening before.
Can I ask our student rep, what is your name again?
Amriel,
Amriel,
yes.
do you see teachers? Do your different teachers have different ways to handle cell phone usage?
I think most of them are pretty even across the board, like they'll give you 1 or 2 warnings to put your phone away. And like if you back talk or if you don't put your phone away after your second warning, then they will take further actions after that. But I think it's pretty even across the board, at least with my teachers.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Just putting this out there, there are some schools that ban the use of cell phones completely. In Chicopee School District, where I grew up, has the kids put their phones in a magnetic bag. And they get unlocked at the end of the day. Unless you have a medical need for your phone. I'm not saying we need to be there, but it, you know. If we're interested in data, I'm sure it's being collected.
Interesting.
I saw it on Facebook, no idea if it would actually work. But the concept of it is amazing, is you get one of the like pocket, like the elementary has their calendars and the fancy little pocket charts, except you have them cell phone size. And that is how a teacher knows if you're in attendance because your phone is in your in the pocket on the wall. And if you're not in class, you've got your cell phone with you. But if you're in the class, your phone's up on the board and they know you're there.
One of the foreign language teachers used to have one of them. It was called a cell phone hotel. Which cell phone in the hotel. Okay.
I knew a college professor once who bought a jamming device. They did.
Don't, let's not go there.
200, it was about $200, something like that. It didn't last long because it was deemed that it wasn't very safe because if the administration needed to make an announcement. You know, but.
Yeah.
You can buy such a thing.
Too bad you take out half the town when you jam the signal.
Well, these are not that strong.
And I presume that was before Chat GPT.
Is what?
Chat GPT, artificial intelligence.
Oh,
It's. All right, getting on to communication committee.
We have
is
not met.
Not met, okay. And goals committee. is-
Goals committee didn't meet, excuse me, but we're scheduled to meet in April, except that Thursday would be school vacation week. I think what I'd like to do is wait till we have a renewed board and talk with people. I'd like to meet in April, but I'd like to make it conducive to whoever becomes on the committee.
Okay. Policy committee is met. Okay.
So March, the third Thursday of March, we'll keep that meeting.
And facilities committee met today, and we had an update from Leland, who's been the I guess EEI's foreman, sort of man in charge. He'd been away for a period of time. I think they said close to 2 months. But he was back and gave us an update on the project, how it's going. Progressing fairly well. There's an electrical device that was scheduled to be delivered, and it's no longer going to get here until November. So that's going to push the project back a little bit. But other than that, they're making pretty good progress. There have been some problems they're trying to address. There's a sound problem in one of the classrooms in Ringe. There's a leak from the roof of I think it's the middle school.
Room
Is it
two
the
oh
middle school
nine,
or the high school.
I don't know, room 209.
Yeah, I think it's the high school.
Yeah, okay. So, but these things are fairly normal, but we spent a good bit of time talking about that because it is one of the biggest expenses that we're currently involved in, and trying to get the best job we can. As Ruben mentioned, we're about to start interviews for John's replacement. And John's made it very clear that John LeClaire, that he's going to do everything he can to stay in touch and stay involved. And not leave us high and dry while this project is going. And then we went through all the other items on the agenda. There's quite a list, quite a few things that are being done, quite a few things that are being planned. And let's say progress is continues to be made. Now we just have to get a good replacement. So it's certainly an important job in Jaffrey Ringe with the age of our buildings. And I think that's the end of the committee updates. And I think we're ready for public comments, if there's anybody
All right.
here.
Yeah, process same as normal. I'll see if I can get the policy to come up now. If not, again, same rules as normal. Raise your hand either virtually or in person. If you're remote, just use the hand raise feature, which should be located at the bottom of your screen. Fortunately, the policy is not coming up, so I'll have to look into that. Yeah, if anybody has any public comments, feel free to raise the hand. All right, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay. Sort of not surprising at this hour of the night. But Nick, do you have a notion of how many people were logged in at any one time?
Yeah, right now we have 4 people.
Well,
Yeah, I would say that pretty standard right now is 3 to 7 on a given night, and it's usually the same people.
Yeah.
So,
okay, thank you. All right, board matters. Or future items. Anybody have board matters or future items that they would like to bring up?
Thank you again, Forbes, for stepping in.
Thank you again.
Okay, well then I would,
At this next board meeting, I have about 3 minutes where I'm the superintendent and the board chair. It's kind of an exciting time annually for me. There was one time it was prolonged, that was extra exciting.
Will you wear a tie?
Maybe a suit,
Here you go.
maybe I'll wear a
There you
jacket,
go.
suit jacket. Let me write that down. But after I'm not the board chair, I'm taking the jacket off. I'll leave the tie on.
good idea. Thank you, Forbes. Do we have a second?
Aye.
All right, very good. I think it's back to unanimous. Thank you, everybody. It's been great.